All right. So good evening to you again, and welcome to the November version of the Seminar for Smart Grid Educational Series. This is Erfan Ibrahim. I am the CEO of the Bazaar LLC, and I am currently the Energy Practice Lead at Cyter Corporation. And I'm going to speak a little bit about the Smart Grid Educational Series before I hand it over to Chris Heckart of IBM, who's going to give us a presentation on Smart Grid. The Smart Grid Educational Series is a forum. It's a free forum that allows for the exchange of ideas amongst the various industry stakeholders on critical issues in the electric sector, smart grid being one of those areas. And we've been having these presentations ever since January of 2012. And we have a webinar every month and a seminar every month. And the seminar has a concurrent webinar also. And IBM has been graciously hosting our seminars every month for the last 5-6 months, and we really appreciate that. And it gives IBM an opportunity to hear the story of smart grid from various stakeholders, and it also provides the stakeholders a regular place where they can come and network. So we are very, very appreciative of this forum and what IBM has been doing for us for the last 6 months. And I couldn't have them continue to host this without telling us what their story is on smart grid. So that's why this is a Thanksgiving special from IBM. Now, just real quick, I wanted to point to, let me see if I can move this slide.
Works.
Page down?
Yep.
Yeah. It's
you have to click in here somewhere so it registers on this screen. And then like that.
Okay. Thank you. So in addition to the seminars and webinars, I had promised at the beginning of this year that we were going to extend into the concept of workshops and have focused workshops on different areas of the smart grid, including generation, transmission, distribution, and end use. And we were going to get into both informational technology as well as operational technology issues, and that we would provide these workshops on site. So these would be at utilities, at regulatory bodies, at product associate, like trade associations, as well as product vendor companies. And the purpose of this is workforce training. I think a lot of you have heard about the acute shortage of skilled people in our sector, and with all the retirements that are occurring now and in the next few years, there's going to be a growing gap. And the challenge is that this is happening at the same time as colleges and universities are shrinking their power engineering programs. And at the same time, there are a lot of people who are getting degrees in this field who are leaving the United States and going to foreign countries. About half of our engineering program at the master's and PhD level are foreign-born people. And with the cap on the immigrant visa or the H-1, the worker's visa, a lot of people are now leaving. There's also a $20,000 annual salary difference between people who are in the power systems area as opposed to other areas in EE. So that's another issue that is not allowing a lot of people who are concerned about their financial security to move in this area. So this is creating a huge gap. And we felt that as part of the educational series, that people of different backgrounds need to have some information immediately so that they can, in their jobs, whether they're at utilities or product vendors or associations or regulators or other stakeholder groups, by having this very applied kind of information, they can do better. They can be more productive in their environment. And this is why the third leg of the Smart Grid educational series is this thing that I have now launched called the Cyber Energy Academy. And we have about 12 instructors that we already have in different areas of expertise who have very applied kind of experience, and they are key people in the industry, and they've worked in various forums. So I wanted to bring this to your attention because there is a rhyme and reason for this forum. It's not just to espouse a bunch of theoretical concepts and leave it to people in their notepads. We really need to go to the next level and start applying these concepts in real-life situations. This will help product vendors with their roadmaps. This will help regulators because it will help reduce the contention that a lot of times occurs when the utilities go to them for getting rate relief and things like that. And it also helps utilities in retaining talent, in bringing people from other parts of their organization into this area, as well as new hires and interns and consultants. So I'm really excited that we are going to have now 3 aspects of the Smart Grid educational series. And if you need any more information, feel free to reach to me. And with that, now what I'd like to do is introduce Chris. Chris Heckart is an authority in Smart Grid. He has been in it for a very long time, and coming from his database background, I think this is really good because so much of Smart Grid involves the creation, the transmission, and the storage of information, as well as the extraction of that information for actionable intelligence. And all of this is critical to Smart Grid. So with that, I would like to introduce Chris Heckart. Chris?
Thank you, Erfan. Given that Erfan has given you his spiel for CyTOR, I'm going to take just a second and talk about the Innovation Center as well. What the Innovation Center does is it is IBM's partnership organization. So we work with people who are IBM business partners. If you produce almost any kind of a software product or are involved with IBM in some other fashion, you can become a business partner. What we do then is provide you with facilities like this, as we have Erfan to hold meetings. IBM does not have to be at your meeting. We would like to be. We would like to help you if we possibly can, but it's not a requirement. We have hardware and software experts who will help you with your problems, and we actually have large quantities of hardware. For me, it happens to be upstairs in a nice new data center where we have our smaller X machines are 2 ways, and we go all the way up to the top end of the X series machines, including blade centers, and then into the power systems with AIX and with I as well. We also have both pure systems and pure application machines up there. So we can pretty much cover any hardware requirements that you might happen to have once you're here in testing. So, yes?
Let's do a sound check with the audience. And so
audience,
can you bring up the chat window?
If you would please send a broadcast to all participants. We have somebody monitoring the chat, and if there's a problem hearing me, she will throw things or something. Okay. A little later, when we start talking a little bit more about how IBM partners with our business partners in the E&U space, we'll talk a little bit about the Global Entrepreneur Program, one of our specific programs, not limited to energy space, but it's something that you might want to carry back to your companies and consider if you happen to be associated with a startup. It's focused totally on new startups there. So the way I want to start this at this point in time is I want to go back a little bit and talk about history. And IBM has been involved in the energy space for a long time, but we really became proactive about it at the time that this came out. And what we did, what our CEO at that time did, was to articulate a vision that where we would take general IT technology and apply it to situations in the real world. And the reason for doing that was we felt that we could manage the real world much better if we applied those concepts and technology to that. And we termed that whole program Smarter Planet. Now, unless you've been hiding under a rock for the last several years, I'm sure you've heard of Smarter Planet. But there are 3 precepts in Smarter Planet. One is that our world is becoming instrumented. Everything has embedded IT devices in it now. And there's becoming more and more and more of them all the time. The world's becoming interconnected. It's real hard to go someplace where you can't connect anymore. By the way, I found one.
Okay.
I went to the SEPSI conference on Bali. Wi-Fi is not ubiquitous there. But it was, most of the time you could get a connection, but it was a challenge. And they say because of the fact that things are instrumented and they are interconnected, by taking that information that's coming in and using that to do, as Erfan says, actionable intelligence, the world is becoming more intelligent. We'll look at some statistics here in a minute. But the one thing that's about this, going back to some of Erfan's comments, is that we are now getting mountains and mountains and mountains of data. It is not information and it is not intelligence yet. It's just data. Okay? So part of the challenge of the smart grid in particular is we have utilities that are now being inundated with literally thousands and thousands of times more information than they ever had before. They went from 1 reading per house, per meter, per month, to potentially as many as 1 every 15 minutes times 24 hours a day. Okay, so 24 times the number per meter. So it's just the getting that, transmitting it back to the central office, doing initial processing on it for quality control things, and then storing it are huge problems. But if we're going to be instrumented, some of the statistics that are associated with that, okay, in 2001, 60 million transistors for every human on the planet. Okay, if you can figure out how old I am from this statement, please don't. I can remember when a transistor was a little radio that you could hold in your hand. It had 1 transistor in it. And that was advanced technology because the one you had at home had vacuum tubes. Okay? And soon there will be 1 billion transistors because everything you do. How many transistors do you think is in the integrated circuit in this little controller? I have no idea, but it's thousands, I'm sure. So, 2005, 1.3 million RFID tags in circulation. Now they're 30 billion. Had another surprise in Amsterdam a few weeks ago. If you don't have a chip card, you can't use a credit card over there very easily. All of their machines that take credit cards require an RFID tag embedded in the card. Pretty much don't happen in this country, mostly for security reasons. If you're not aware of it, if you have a chip card in your pocket, on eBay or Amazon, you can buy a reader, walk down the sidewalk, and scan the cards of the people that are walking by you, chip cards. So there are some security challenges. Erfan.
During Grid Week in Washington, D.C. a couple months ago, observation was made that in the last 12 months, we have produced more transistors than grains of rice on this planet.
Are you implying that I'm related to a grain of rice? Okay, interconnected. Having all of these transistors and RFID tags and everything else is of no value whatsoever if they can't transmit what they gather and what they know back to the central authority. And so mobile phone subscriptions, 3.3 billion in 2007. Estimated 2 billion people on the web by 2012. That's not only in mobile devices, that's the whole thing. I personally believe that's probably low, but there are no statistics to prove it one way or the other. Daily financial market transmissions, 5 billion to 130 billion plus per day. When you call your broker, you just send a message. When he responds, it says, sorry, you're too late. That's 2 messages, and multiply that. Do you really want 16 times the amount of personal information on the web that you have now? I personally have a problem with that. Okay, but if you talk to the younger generation, my nieces and nephews, they share information on the web that I would never consider giving to anybody at any time, and they think it's normal. So sometimes if you want to have a lot of fun, go out on Google and type in your name and see what comes back. Intelligence. So this is kind of IBM's strategy statement to a certain extent about smarter planning. We thought about IT in this, and we did this for many years, and in my opinion, we're the best in the bunch at doing it, okay? Because we've done all of it, and we've done it for a long time. And then we thought about the infrastructure of the world, buildings, factories, hospitals, pipelines, energy grids, whatever, and said the two have to be related. So they're converging, and we're doing it, okay? If we go back, in the energy arena, these are some of IBM's initiatives, okay? So we're working with smarter traffic systems. We have in place now traffic management systems in cities around the globe. Some of those are chargeable access systems. One in London where you can't go into the center of the city without paying money. Okay, that's an IBM technology under the covers. Smarter oil field technologies, how to drill better, how to evaluate the oil-bearing strata better, how to decide when and where and how to frack if you're going to do that. Smarter cities, how do you manage a city to be as efficient and as sustainable as possible? Grids, we'll be talking more about. But you know what? There's another kind of grid here. Water grid. Rule of thumb, for those of you who are like I did, grew up in the desert. By the way, Ralph, I went to school in Las Cruces, just up the road from you, so I know UTEP well. And I'll be there in a couple of months visiting, so be nice to me. All right, come on in. And you can go a long time without electricity. You can go a long time without food. 3 days for water. So if the water system stops delivering, you better find another source real fast. And the smart water delivery grid is directly analogous to the smart electricity grid at every stage. And we'll talk a little bit about that when we get farther down. Buildings and regions, all of that, all of these things are things that you can look at as a microcosm. They can be instrumented, they can be interconnected, and they can be made intelligent by the application of smart analytics, okay? There are many analytic solutions out there. I do not, with one exception, I'm not going to mention products tonight at any level, but I don't care which one you use. You must have some way of taking all the data that you gather and turning it into something that's intelligent that will allow you to make decisions, that will allow you to make it actionable. Okay, now we're starting into where IBM was coming from when they started looking at energy and grids. And these are the market forces that IBM identified in a variety of studies as saying this is going to force the electrical grid to change. Okay, I'm not going to read every single one of these. This is like Godmother and Apple Pie. You should be very familiar with it. If you're not, come talk to me afterwards and bring your checkbook. Okay, the other thing that's driving that is the change from the traditional grid where we had centralized generation and then just a tree structure pushing energy out, pushing electricity out. What is this called in a manufacturing world? Just-in-time delivery, okay? If it got to here and they had estimated wrong, it got wasted. It was just thrown away, okay? Now we're moving to a decentralized model where we have many different kinds of generations, capabilities located in many different places, and it's two-way. The solar cells on top of my house put energy back in the grid. Okay? You can't imagine what a shock that was to PG&E when I called them up and said, I want a bidirectional meter. You want what? But this is the way of the future. To be sustainable, it has to be. And that's part of what IBM's drive is behind Smarter Planet, is being sustainable. Okay. When we looked at the utility business, we decided to build a logical architecture of that business, and this is it. So what we have are power gen, transmission and distribution, customer operations, standard back office, enterprise servers, built on top of security. This is something I'll talk about, but it's an integration framework across all of these. And then the physical infrastructure, servers, networks, all of that kind of stuff. And then in each of these areas, we also looked at it and said, if we're going to optimize this, what do they really need in the way of solutions? IBM doesn't build these, okay? We partner with other companies to build them, and then we jointly go sell them, okay? So when I'm looking at plant operations in a, I'll say coal-fired plant, natural gas, not so much nuclear, Erfan, sorry. We have built with a company called Black & Veatch a very elaborate fuel optimization planning system, so that at any time they can say, okay, I need more fuel, and here's what's available. What's the optimal mixture for both driving my generators and at minimal cost? Okay, and like I said, I could tell you the product. I will do that later on if you really want to know about it. I do not want to talk about products tonight. Transmission and distribution, work in asset management, okay? What that is more than anything else is asset management, wires, transformers, poles, trucks, substations, switches, electrical switches, not IT switches, okay? Mobile workforce. What's the one single way a utility wants to cut costs? Minimize truck rolls. You go in and talk to them about how they can avoid 25% of their truck rolls, and I guarantee you have their attention right out of the gate. Supply chain management, keep the inventory small. Don't buy it till you need it. Customer operations. One of the fallouts of that change in the model from the centralized tree structure to the decentralized structure was that no longer is the customer just a delivery point who can be ignored so long as they pay their bill. Now the utility must begin treating the customer as a real customer who has wants, feelings, desires, complaints, and start managing those complaints both for the customer and for themselves. And you do that primarily through establishing a bidirectional communications flow with those back and forth between the utility and the customers. Some are doing that really, really well, ahead of the curve, and some of those are doing it less well. I'm sure we can all think of a local example if we try a little bit. They're getting there. They're so much better now that it's just unbelievable, but they're just not there yet. I'm not going to talk about these at all. When IBM finally began to understand that we didn't want to just focus on the electrical utility, we wanted to focus on all utilities, we came up with the concept of the Intelligent Utility Network. So the ones that you see right here are for electrical, transmission, and distribution, but we also work with gas companies, distribution networks, and we also work with water networks. So we're going to kind of do a little bit of a deep dive into all of these things now. And I think that will give you that background and overview and scope of what IBM's doing, where it's coming from, what it's investing in the energy and utility space. If you have questions, please ask. I can sit up here and talk forever, long after the pizza rolls out. So,
let's check online to see if
Angie, got anything?
Nope.
we're good.
They must be awestruck.
There was one comment that was when you were asking about the sound.
Yeah.
But it didn't send to everybody, so I couldn't see that.
Yeah, they said it was good.
Okay.
Okay. So let's go down to
For those who can't hear us.
It shows up as a little blip when anyone sends a chat.
you get that little blue box.
And then it disappears. So then we know that there's something wrong.
Just as a reminder, if you do send something to the chat window, we'll try to check it periodically, but do send it to all participants so that the lady, all the panelists, so that the lady we have monitoring that can see that and give us a hint that there's a question there. Okay, within power generation, this is kind of a breakdown and description of each of those solutions that we did there. Once again, we don't build this, okay? We partner with companies to build the solution, and then we both go sell the solution. And as you'll see here in a bit, we've done this worldwide. We have hundreds of reference accounts, which if you're interested in going through those, see me afterwards and we can set up some time to do that. But plant operation, make the operational performance in existing plants as efficient as it possibly can be. Fleet optimization, obviously the fleet is the vehicles, so we want to make sure that those are as efficient as they're dispatched when they need to be and only when they need to be. And supply expansion, this is primarily in construction, not in the supply of consumables to the plant. So when you're building a plant, you want the design and construction to enhance their capabilities, not to provide a barrier and a challenge to what they're trying to do. That is especially true for nuclear plants, which have a lot of very special requirements in their construction. Yes, Erfan.
Just a note to the folks who are online, the slide deck is going to be converted into a PDF format, and I'm going to have it put up on the Dropbox, and the webcast recording also is going to be a link, and I will be sending out a Microsoft Word document that has the links of all the Dropbox entries and all the webcast recordings since January of this year. So there are many, many people. There are about 300-400 people who have joined the distribution since October. So they will get all the repositories. So just relax, chill, watch the presentation, and know that it will be in a theater near you.
And one thing that I'll add to that is that if for some reason you want to get in contact with me, Erfan has my contact information, and he'll be happy to route that to me. And we can set up whatever level of dialogue that you want at that point in time. For those of the people that are here in the room, I have a whole stack of cards up here. You're welcome to take one. And give me a call, send me an email, and we'll see what we can arrange. Okay. Work and asset management. Mobile workforce management. Obviously, a lot of electric company utility operations people are in the field doing things, and the ability to actually dispatch, monitor what they're doing, support them as necessary, and then redirect them as necessary is vitally important to the utility. Asset lifecycle management. A utility is incredibly asset intensive, and IBM believes that you should manage those assets in a life cycle manner where you have acquisition, you have design, spec, intend to build, acquisition, installation, maintenance. Maintenance, maybe you do a lot of maintenance over a lot of years, that's the hope. You then have decommission and disposal. So that's what that is. If you were around, was 2 months ago, we had a presentation focused just on asset management. Can't remember the guy's name. I know I see him back here, but I can't remember the name.
Bob Kaler.
Bob Kaler did a great job of that. So if you want to talk about asset management, I'll be happy to talk to you, but Bob is a great resource for that. Okay? And then for some reason these are sliding off the end of the screen there. In any event, that's supply chain management down there, and that is the consumables at a utility. Okay? And I'm going to skip intelligent utility networks for just a minute. Customer operations transformation, management. In all honesty, IBM is just getting started in this area. We've put a lot of effort into T&D. Starting this year, we put a lot of effort into power gen. We're just getting this one ramped up. We know where we want to go, and we're in the process of identifying partners that we want to work with and figuring out how we can build out the solutions here. Now, all utilities have one of these, a contact center. Maybe they do a real good job with this, and maybe they don't. But so we want to optimize that capability. We want to have customer systems that make it easy for the utility to manage. And we want to be able to manage this customer relationship to the satisfaction of both the utility and the customer itself. Sure, go ahead, Erfan.
Yeah, so Chris, I wanted to add that mobile applications are becoming very important in this space also.
They are. They are.
As people are basically carrying around a computer in their pockets now through the smartphone, they would like to have applets on their smartphone that does a lot of day-to-day stuff, from opening a trouble ticket with a utility, to reading how much energy they've used, to looking and having some situational awareness of where there's a problem in the service territory. All those kinds of things are now being put in mobile applications. And the nice thing is that if you have a mobile application for the workforce and you have a mobile application for the customer, then you basically have a service anywhere, anytime kind of situation, as opposed to waiting for a supervisor to tell you what's going on. And I think that will reduce the time, the mean time to repair, for one, and it will improve the customer satisfaction.
I'm going to add two things to that. Okay, we have a couple of partners who are marketing applications at the moment, and what they do is predict where outages are likely to occur, primarily from weather. Okay, so that you can pre-stage your mobile workforce to be in a given area where you think is going to be impacted by a storm, because for the last 5 storms it went down. And then with the mobile workforce, you can actually dispatch them directly to a specific failure location, okay, after they've been pre-staged there, so that their response time is cut by several orders of magnitude. The other is, yes?
Did this happen for Storm Sandy some weeks back?
Not to my knowledge.
There was an article today in the news about how smart grid has helped in the Sandy situation, but I didn't really get time to look at all the details of what aspect of smart grid. It may be some early warning systems. It could possibly be the increased number of sensors that are on the lines.
That's what it is.
Those kinds of things. So
What they're really looking at with smart grid there is that rather than having to send out a truck to see whether someplace is down, all they have to do is try to ping the meter. If the meter responds, they know that both the network delivery system and the meter are operational. That doesn't mean they want to turn them on, because the house behind them may be trashed and it would start a fire, but at least they know that part is good. Okay, so that's where smart meters are helping there.
No, I was actually thinking about when you talked about pre-staging.
Yeah, no, to my knowledge, there was no pre-staging there. Okay, part of the reason for that was that Sandy was, when it came on shore, was so much larger and more forceful than that they had thought that it would be. And the other thing was that it hit places that they never expected it to hit.
I wouldn't want to be a truck in a tunnel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, or on the
bridge?
Or no, on the bridge, or in the metro, in the subway.
I was in Sandy, and thank goodness for text. That's how we communicated when everything went out.
Yeah, I believe that. The other thing is that we have product which will, to the smartphone or to a tablet, For a utility worker who may not be knowledgeable about a particular device he has to fix, he can call up all the drawings, he can call up a video of how to fix it, he can consult back with knowledgeable people at the central location, and that enables that person to make repairs that he normally would never be dispatched for because he can't do it on his own. But with that mobile technology delivering knowledge to him or her, it now makes it possible for them to achieve that. Yes, Erfan.
I think a point that we need to make, especially in our industry, is those people who understand the technology and the information and the way the architecture, as Chris has described. One of the things that we have to be very careful of is not to have too high an expectation from smart grid before all the parts have been laid out. Because quite often you'll have the technology implementation, but that information layer has not been completely architected. So a lot of data may end up in flat ASCII files, which it will not allow you to extract from it, parse it, and extract information when you need it. So this is still work in progress, and integrators like IBM and others are helping utilities do that, lay out the architecture so that that layer is working on top of the technologies that are being implemented.
Okay, now we want to talk a little bit about the Intelligent Utility Network. And we really have 2 or 3 different things there. One is what we call smart metering and beyond. What is that? What that is an end-to-end vision of what we think the smart grid ultimately should be. We think it's probably about 75% accurate. The reason it's not 100% accurate is, first of all, nobody can predict the future. But second of all, for example, in the communications network between the smart meter and all the instrumented devices back to the substation to the central office, all of that technology is still evolving. The standards aren't there. There's 10 or 15 different players about how you're going to do it. There's Wi-Fi, there's PLC, there's radio, there's the standard phone lines, any number of strategies, and nobody knows how that's going to shake out over the long run. Okay? In my mind, that's probably the single most important question. Which of those technologies, plus the standards, which Erfan is very involved in, and IBM is too, as I'll show in a few minutes, that's probably the biggest next step that the smart grid has to go through, other than just pure deployment of meters, which are the enabler of all of this other stuff. Okay? Second thing is grid operations. How do you take grid operations from 25 years ago and bring it into the 21st century? That's what that is. Okay? So that's development, planning, display, integration, taking all that data and making it intelligent, and then providing it to the operator in a way that makes sense to them. The way that they can really make decisions, do actionable things on it. IUN, that's instrument and interconnect the actual nodes on the network, so that the data gets back to grid operations to be made into intelligence, so that the operators can be as efficient as possible. Go ahead.
One thing that, we're marrying technologies of different levels of maturity. You have things that have been around 50, 60 years with things that have been around 10, 15 years to things that you're just implementing. So in a heterogeneous environment like that, the focus should be on the business applications and have an end-to-end perspective of those applications and look at technology as just an enabler for those applications rather than expecting forklift upgrades in order to reach some state of nirvana, which is not going to happen in a slow economy with limited funds. So this is why architecture is critical. Having a concept of layering so that you know when you are talking about something actually which layer are you in and which subdomain of the smart grid you're operating in and which interface are you working with for that data exchange. And having that layered concept across these domains allows you to have a very modular approach to smart grid. So as things become obsolete, you take that widget out, but you're not expecting everything else to change as a result of that. And we've seen this in networking. It works really well. And we migrated from X.25 to TCP/IP. And there was a time when there was a part of the network that was one way and another one another way, and there were these gateways. They were kind of ugly, but they served their purpose. So we have to keep this concept of modularity and end-to-end and remain focused on the application, because that's the economic driver. Technologies don't make money, applications do.
Correct. I'll add one thing to that. Whatever strategy we pick going forward, it must be an open architecture and an open access strategy and an open access standard. Proprietary doesn't cut it anymore by anybody. So if you're talking to some company that tells you that it's better to have a solution that's all one flavor, and I don't care what the company name is, laugh at them and walk away, because they're not doing you a favor. They really are not. Okay? Angie, how are we doing over there?
We're doing good. No question.
Okay. IBM looked at security both from the point of view of IT a long time ago, and then as we evolved through the various frameworks, and IBM has a lot of frameworks, not just in energy and utilities, and up here in the corner, what we came up with was, okay, security, this is research. What's another word for what's happening right there? We've used it about 5 times tonight already. Analytics. Analyzing the data to determine where the threats are, where you need advanced security, where you need multiple layers of security. Up here, this is basically new things. What are all the new threats? What's the new stuff coming out? Get a chair from the room over next door. Up there, what do all utilities have to do that drives them crazy? File risk, governance, and compliance paperwork. Okay, and a large part of that is security. Anybody who can't say NERC SIP needs to do some study. Okay, we have professional services, and we have, this says cloud management services, but it's really infrastructure management services, okay? And software appliances, we actually have an appliance that does XML security, and it is an appliance, not software. There will be a software version of that. There will be a cloud version of that someday. Unfortunately, they don't call me and tell me exactly when, but I can tell you it's coming. So if you're looking at compliance solutions, they need to be in here, they need to be in here, they need to be in here, here, and here. Okay, because that's the scope that you're going to have those compliance things.
I wanted to say a thing or two about NERC SIP, because recently version 5 got approved. And there is a remarkable change from if you look at 4 and then you look at 5. And you can see that the feedback of the industry has gone into version 5 in a big way. Mm-hmm. And I would really invite you to look at least the cliff notes of 4 and the cliff notes of 5. Because what was happening previously was that there was a lot of focus on compliance, but not enough focus on security and reliability if you went through that process. So there was pushback from the industry saying, you know, we're still liable if something happens, even though you gave us a passing grade. So the version 5 tries to bring that together in the way they even do self-reporting. For instance, now if you have a process that is in place to, if you may, plug the holes, then you don't have to report. You can just, because you have a process, then you are waived. So there are certain benefits like that. But the key thing is bringing security and reliability and compliance together in a common framework is very important, because your labor resource is very limited in a utility. And you can't just send people off to do compliance work at the expense of security and reliability. So the two are being brought together, and I'm very enthused by version 5. I think that it's a step in the right direction.
There's a question.
Okay, go ahead.
It says that they wanted to ask you to elaborate a little bit more on the grid operations in the context of IUN when it comes to and aging grids, with obsolete equipment, and its shortage and resource preventing upgrade by time.
Okay. One of the challenges of grid operations is that many utilities have a very diverse landscape, from the newest, latest, and greatest of the smart grid capabilities, and they're trying to manage, but they're still trying to manage the stuff that has been in place 25 or 30 years ago. The IUN is really the goal that they're trying to achieve with that newest, latest, and greatest of instrumented and intelligent devices. How they manage the old stuff while they're transitioning that into the IUN strategy is a challenge that grid ops is faced with right now. There are various intermediate strategies that allow you to extract as much information as possible from the old stuff while you're not getting totally overwhelmed by the volume of data coming in with the new stuff. None of them are real satisfactory. They are all stopgap methods that are there just to bide time while they evolve the old stuff into the new stuff. All the utilities are trying to not have to implement all the new stuff all at the same time. That's a monumental task, both in terms of just planning and workforce capabilities, but also in terms of dollar investment in those things. So they're trying to phase those in, typically on a substation by substation kind of a basis, over as much time as the various standards organizations such as FERC and NERC and so on will allow them to take. NERC and FERC want it to be much faster, the utilities want it to be much slower, and hopefully there will be a common happy medium somewhere in the middle. Does that answer your question, whoever you are? Okay.
Yes.
Cool. Privacy and data security, the areas that you need to be working with in there are infrastructure, services, the analytics and research for new threats, data protection, okay, and application protection. I got to speed this up or I'll never get done.
Okay.
Okay. Securing the utility. This is physical security combined with standard personnel security. Am I Chris? If I'm Chris, what am I allowed to access, and what can I do when I get there? From a standard IT kind of a perspective. Physical security is, Chris may work for the utility. Chris used to work for a utility. Like, Chris didn't have access to all the substations. They knew better than to give me access to all the substations. So it's not only the fact that I'm a legal employee, it's, okay, I'm not allowed to go everywhere, see everything, and do everything unless I'm accompanied by someone who is knowledgeable in that particular arena.
So this is an area that is becoming very important, and this is a bridge between IT and OT. Because imagine if you have an emergency situation, you will bring in a lot of third-party people to help you. They may not have access to all the things that they need to get their job done. So having, like a lightweight directory assistance, LDAP type protocol from the IT side that you can use to give privileges for periods of time to groups of people so that they can get their job done, and then revoke that privilege as soon as they're done, so when they go work at some other utility, they don't have access to that substation. So these are areas where IT can actually help the operations side be more nimble.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about this. Okay, now we're getting down towards the partner programs, which is really the part that I work with more than anything else. And as I said earlier, we're really trying to develop a partner ecosystem where they bring their industry knowledge, we bring our software and systems knowledge so that we can put together a value chain that's proper for both of us and is also beneficial to the utility. We have relationships with SAP, Oracle, Cisco. Hey, surprise, do you know we do almost as much business with Oracle, who is our bitter enemy in another part of the business? You know, we do a ton of that. Cisco is a real friend-friend kind of relationship. I mean, we really complement our capabilities there. Local partners, hopefully that's some of you sometime. We'd love to establish that relationship. If you would like to do that, get my card, get back to me, and we'll certainly sit down and talk about how we can make that happen. And that's true for everybody on the phone as well as the people that are here. Okay? We have some validation partner offerings. When IBM made the decision that we didn't want to try to build all this stuff ourselves, that we wanted to partner with people who already had a good idea, that already had a solution, at that point in time, we said we have to have some way to guide them with integrating what we have with what they have so that we come out with a coherent whole that makes sense to do there. And that's what the Solution Architecture for Energy and Utilities, SAFE, is. It is an integration framework. I can talk much longer than I have already tonight about that one topic, so we're going to do kind of a quick and dirty overview, and then if you're interested, please get back to me and we'll go much more into detail. The other thing is that we have energy and utility centers of excellence. One is based in La Gaude, which is near Nice in France. One is in Austin. There's one in China. And I'll have one down the hall here sometime next year. Okay? It won't be on the same scale as these others, but it will be a place where you can come and look at partner IBM partners, joint solutions, and see what they can do, how they can do it, and whether that's a good fit for your particular company. If you're in the market, it's also a place where you can look at what others have done, and maybe you don't want to talk to IBM, but you want to talk to STI. And the two of you together set up a partnership to build something. And we like that too. That's great. Okay, go ahead, Erfan.
I wanted to bring up a business benefit for this kind of model. The point that Chris was making earlier about trying to bring in too many technologies and too many processes at the same time, it's quite cumbersome for a utility because their workforce is limited. But when you have demonstrated solutions like this, where you have an integrator that can bring vendors from different aspects of smart grid technology together and do proof of concept or proof of technology in this way, then that reduces the risk, that financial risk that you're going to take trying to do it in your lab and trying to figure out whether this will all work or not. Having a company like IBM being further up on that learning curve helps a purchaser of these types of technologies to make much faster moves with lower financial risk.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit about one particular, deliberate.
Oh, okay.
One particular program that IBM has right now. It is called the Global Entrepreneur Program. It is not focused on the energy space. It is across all industries, all areas that IBM works in. And this is focused on startups and how do we take early curve startups and help them grow their business, grow their scope, this sort of thing. And just to demonstrate that we're not talking about peanuts here. In the analytics area, IBM thinks that over the next couple of years, that's $164 billion a year opportunity. I'm sure your company would like to have a big part of that. Clouds, 181 billion.
Over how many years?
Per year, 1 year. Okay?
1%.
Smarter Planet, which is green and sustainability efforts, 66 billion. Smarter Cities, 20 billion. I could live on the interest on that. Most of you could, couldn't you?
Positive.
Yep. So what do? Global Entrepreneur. Okay, first of all, I should say, we do give money to certain venture capitalists. We do not directly give money to companies, but we will help you in kind, okay? So we'll do mentoring and network. We'll help you with industry insights, not by me necessarily, but by true experts. Access to IBM technical leaders, both hardware and software. Access to software. If you're in the Global Entrepreneur Program, you can get almost effectively any IBM software for free for development purposes only. Okay? Local go-to-market support, Smarter Planet visibility. And here's a link for you, which you'll get again when Erfan sends this out. Smarter Planet visibility is one of the ways we've implemented that is a concept called Smart Camps. So you, as part of the Global Entrepreneur Program, if you want to submit your application to the Smart Camp, we have typically a team of about eight VCs, and we do this by regions around the world, and they'll take all the submissions in their area and decide who wins. Who's the best idea, who's the best innovation that's there, okay? Then all the innovators come together from all the regions around the world, and we fly them to wherever that location is at our expense. And once again, we have a panel of people, and they decide who wins. Those people get marketing support, direct cash in that particular case for marketing, and they get development. We cart them around to shows and put them in booths, and we give them technical support. The first Smart Camp was 2 years ago, and a local company called Streetlight. Okay, what they do is they have a parking application for your smartphone. They put sensors in parking places. You look on the smartphone, and it tells you which ones are empty in any city there. So how many times have you gone around the block 12 times hoping somebody's going to pull out just when you happen to be there so that you can get their parking place? Now you can know that, oh, right over there, there's an empty parking spot. I've seen it. It works. And it's up in San Francisco. Yes?
I wanted to make a point about business and competition, because we are in a slow economy, but we're also in an economy in which the private sector has some $2 trillion stashed away in their treasury, and yet we are all running after a few $100 million that the government is putting out. So we need to rethink this, and by September of next year, when the stimulus money runs out, we have a narrow window of opportunity now of about 9-10 months to really rethink this. It's already happening with the Smart Grid Interoperability Panel, the SGIP. It's moving into the private sector starting, I believe, January. We're going to see a lot of these stimulus-funded projects coming to an end in the next 8-9 months. But I don't see the momentum picking up in the private sector to make up for the slack. So I think that there are some mental models that we need to shed and shed now. One of them is this idea that somehow we're competing. We're not competing. If you look at the numbers that Chris just shared about the potential opportunity, I can tell you today, we don't have enough skilled people to meet that business demand. So the problem is we're thinking small, and therefore we're thinking we're competing. Whether it's an IBM or Pricewaterhouse or Capgemini or Ernst & Young or Saiter or anyone, if the market truly flourishes, I say we are underserving that market. So what we have to do is put on our innovative cap. And I'm glad that you brought this up, Chris, with all the entrepreneurial things that IBM is encouraging. Because if we can unleash that creativity and bring in this $2 trillion that's sitting in the banks, then, you know, Obama and all these people will be happy with the increased tax revenue that they're going to get. So some of that fiscal cliff could be avoided. But we really need new people to come into this field, get trained, so that we can meet that business demand. I feel that there is not only a workforce gap, but there is a gap in innovative ideas that people are putting, I mean, they're thinking it, but they're not bringing it to fruition.
No action.
So we need to get off this mindset that somehow the government is going to give us more funding and then we're going to show our creative side. That trainer wheel is coming off very soon.
Okay. If you are interested in the Global Entrepreneur Program, or if you know someone who is interested and might be interested in the Entrepreneur Program, please talk to Angie or talk to me, because we'd like to talk to you or to your friend who has that, because we think we can help them. We need to talk to them to find out whether that's really true or not. Okay? Now I want to talk a little bit about the solution architecture for energy and utilities, what that is, and how you can go about becoming part of that if you would like to. Find my cursor.
Maybe about 10 more minutes.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to kind of jump around a little bit because there's. When IBM looked at utilities, what we found out is these are the same basic business domains that you saw back in our general purpose architecture before. And we wanted an integration framework that would accomplish these value propositions, align technology, business and technology needs, because what we see in utilities is that they're very siloed. Ops doesn't talk to IT, except at gunpoint, maybe not even then, and so on. Want to grab as many best practices to accelerate solution development, reusable patterns whenever possible. Adoption of open and industry-wide standards, that's what we talked about, mentioned earlier, and have a lot of choice about business applications from IBM business partners. Notice nowhere in there does it say IBM is going to sell you anything. If you really want us to, we will. But this is what we're really trying to achieve with the SAFE framework right here. Okay, we can apply it electric, gas, and water, as I said earlier. Now, across all of these areas, we looked at said, okay, we need business capabilities, software capabilities for these areas. Regulatory, risk and compliance management, security, business process automation. How do you identify business processes that may be now siloed, but every silo does them, okay? And manage them across the whole business rather than on a per silo basis. Improved customer experience, informed decision-making, analytics, again, asset lifecycle management, asset device and service monitoring. That's watching and managing the network that makes up the control backbone of the smart grid. And then intelligent utility transformation management. How do you implement the IUN in a structured manner that will not kill the utility in the process of actually trying to do that?
There's sequence implied in the spec?
No. No. Okay, definition. It's there. These are some of our partners. They've gone through that. Most of these we're working with very closely on joint applications and joint solutions. We'd love to have your company join the list here. Okay? And we have a huge sales team on the E&U side who go out and will be selling your application as well as the IBM components. We also have a huge services organization who will be going out there and be willing to implement your application as well as the IBM components that are in there. And now I'm going to have to hunt around a little bit to find the last part of what I want to go through here because I don't know what happened to it. Well, let's do it this way. I think I've got a broken link in here. Okay, this is the section right here. Okay, we're spending, let's go back to screen mode. Oh, now that's dirty.
You went back to the
Erfan. Yeah, no, good work.
All roads lead back to the host.
Okay. Okay. We're working with a lot of different industry standards organizations, and here's lists of what those are. Erfan, I'm sure you've run into some of our people in a lot of these. We are not just sitting on our thumbs when we're there. We are active driving participants. We're trying to bring as many parties as possible into the conversation, and we're trying to drive as much consensus as we can, as quickly as we can.
I would like to recognize Ron Ambrosio of IBM,
Yes.
who has done a remarkable job helping us with the standards.
Ron is the energy head for our research and development division. He sits in Armonk or Poughkeepsie, somewhere up there, I'm not totally sure. And he is extremely active in many of these things, and some of his people are active in the others, and he's really focused on them.
And in cybersecurity, Jeff Katz.
Yeah. Jeff Katz and someone whose name you may not know, and I just went totally blank. I'll get it for you. Both he does the Smart Grid Security blog. Andy Bachman.
Andy
Okay.
Bachman.
Those two guys are really focused on cybersecurity. Yeah. Andy lives, breathes, thinks Smart Grid cybersecurity. If you're not subscribing to the Smart Grid Security blog, I strongly recommend that you do so. It's well worth your time and effort to read that. If you need a link, get back to me, and I will do so. And I'll help you with that.
If you want me to, I can type it out right now if you want.
Up to you.
Yeah.
Okay. We do research papers, okay, and we participate in all of these different green tech and smart grid organizations there. Some of those I'm in, some of those are not. If it says financial, you know what higher math is to me? My pocket change went over $1. So I don't do financial stuff. Okay. We helped in the development of a thing called the Smart Grid Maturity Model. We then gave it to the University of Cincinnati. You can go out and download it right now. And what it does is help a utility assess itself in all of these areas so that they can build a roadmap to get from here to IUN. Okay? Again, I strongly recommend you go out and have a look at this. It's well worth the time and investment. There's an incredible amount of knowledge built into the backside of this that you can take advantage of.
Chris?
Yes.
There was a question. So on the safe architecture, it says that the slide suggests safe sits on infrastructure layer. What minimal requirement has the infrastructure layer have to meet in order to enable safe?
None.
None. Okay.
There are minimum requirements, but they're not in the infrastructure area. And he should get in contact with me, and I'll be happy to discuss those with him at whatever level of detail that he would like, or she, as the case might be.
Okay.
Okay. IBM Research. This is Ron Ambrosio. Okay. These are some of the things that we're doing research on, and in this particular case, it's actually a pilot project in the Pacific Northwest. Has been for about 3 or 4 years now. Okay, and when they've had some really interesting weather in the last several years in the Pacific Northwest, and the Pacific and the Olympic Peninsula and the bottom of the bay down near Olympia, Washington, south of Tacoma, and the Air Force Base that's right there, whose name escapes me, were able to stay up and running where the rest of the region went down. So that was this and this and this combined into a single proof of technology, proof of concept there.
Are there publicly available white papers on that?
Yes, there are. Cool. And, okay, here's some other things that we're doing. Gridwise Alliance Consortium. We are the highest level sponsor, plus we're a past chair of that. That was Guido Bartels. Okay, we're both, and we are still interoperability working group leader. SGIP is big with us. It is one of our real driving things. Smart Grid Federation, we're currently the chair and founding member. That's about to change, I think. Gridwise Architectural Conference, we're on the technical committee for electrical grids, IEC PC57 that's there. We're on the NIST panel for smart group interoperability, okay, and ISO 10812, okay. We also predict and are in all of the IEC working committees, 61 whatever, depending on which one you're looking for, all of the SIM standards, we're there. Okay, these are the standards organizations. Most of these I just kind of skipped through real quickly, trying to get Erfan out of here on time. Okay, more industry organizations where we participate. These are a little more worldwide rather than local to North America. And same thing here. And that's pretty, I have some more information here about, which you'll get when you get the deck, about the mechanics of the, I want to show you this one as well. These are the solution centers and research facilities that we have around the world. IBM Austin, that's actually moving to Dallas, by the way. Lagode, France, this is in the mountains about 15 kilometers north of Nice, in the middle of Provence. It is, they actually, when I talked about the smart metering and beyond thing, we've actually built a demo project there. Real physical meters, all of the components, all the way back to the back-end systems, and you can walk in and play with it. Okay? Call Jean-Francois Marmet, and he'll set it up for you. Okay? So if you happen to be in that area, and there's a whole lot of reasons for going to that area that have nothing to do with smart grid, I strongly suggest that you go in there. These are the various capabilities that you'll see there. I said I wouldn't talk about products, so I won't mention the names that are up there. Okay, and then in China, this is really focused just on China. The Chinese are, at this point in time, still very parochial in that they really don't want to work with a lot of people who are outside of China. So you have to have a presence in China that's there. It is staffed by knowledgeable Chinese people. If they need me, they bring me in. If they need Ron Ambrosio, they bring him in. If they need Jeff Katz, they bring him in. But the base is always local. So if you're looking for an entry point potentially into the China market, maybe we can help you with that. But you've got to be a partner, and you've got to be safe validated and some other things to take advantage of that. I could continue to talk, but that's kind of pretty much all I had to say. So
I think at this point, I will let people in the room as well as the audience online start formulating some of their questions. We'll entertain about 10-15 minutes of Q&A, because we've kind of had a semi-interactive session. But while you're formulating your thoughts, what I wanted to do was just make a point about the material that Chris has shared. He shared with you technical information about smart grid from an architectural perspective, explain how the various parts fit together, and then he showed what IBM is doing. And as you know, in Smart Grid Educational Series, our main focus is not to push product, and Chris did a wonderful job of putting material on the slides without reading the names. But I think that important thing for the audience to focus on is that this is a case study of what it takes to be active in the smart grid business. Don't look at it just that it's an IBM brand and they're trying to sell. Everyone knows IBM. They are selling and they're doing quite well. This is an example to all the other people who are on the call and here in person to see that if they want to be active and successful in the smart grid business, what will it take? And notice that IBM is involved in every phase of smart grid, from the initial specifications of standards that are coming out from use case analysis, all the way through testing, certification, then implementing the technology, and then maintaining it in real environments. So you can see all the phases, and they're involved in that. Now, that doesn't mean that everyone has to be involved, because IBM has the gross domestic product of many third world countries. They do.
No, they do.
So, without the population. So
I don't go that far.
Huh? Without the population.
No. Last time they counted IBMers up, which was about 6 weeks ago, 437,500 of us.
Right, but Fremont has 600,000 people. So, I mean, if you have a country of like
Fremont's
tens
not
of
third
millions,
world.
tens of millions of people, has a gross domestic product equal to that of IBM. So my point is that they can be in all places at all times and be involved in everything. But you can take any piece of this and become active. And he has even provided you an API, a human API, saying, you want to do business with IBM, you can come and connect with us in our partnership. So if you have innovative ideas, don't hold them back because you're worried that a venture capitalist is not going to give you the money. If your ideas have some merit, and if you can show how they can be applied in real environments, I think an audience like IBM would be a good one. So the purpose of Smart Grid Educational Series is for us to move from a mindset of pessimism and minimalist thinking into a creative mindset. We need to start thinking, and I mentioned this a little while ago, that we're not going to reach our production possibility curve with pessimism. There has to be an element of optimism, and we have to take risks. We have to go out there and occasionally be the fool, but it's okay, because in that process we will learn and we will implement something that tomorrow will help us grow. I'm finding increasingly in our business, especially with the slowdown of the economy, everyone is just trying to covet, okay, this is what I got, this is what I got. And in that business, your gross domestic product is not going to grow. And we're not going to unleash that money that we were talking about in the private sector. And the bell is ringing. You know, just kind of like a Salvation Army bell. You know, after Thanksgiving, you hear that at the grocery store. We're hearing that bell. And it's going to be very hard to get money out of the government sector in the next 12 to 24 months. We have to use our creative energy, reach out to organizations like the IBMs and Cisco's and Oracle's and others, and start showing our creativity and saying, if you unleash some of this money with our creative idea, this is where we can take it. And to the utilities, I would say quickly that you cannot scale down your workforce to the point where you just outsource the whole thing. Integrators like IBM and Capgemini and PwC and others do very well when there's an informed workforce in the utility. Then the engagements last. If you just put the shop out and one day you have to just close the shop, the integrator loses their business and you lose your business. So we have to have trained people in the workplace, and not people who are 2 years or 3 years from retirement, new people. And I'm finding, you know, there was a study done by CEWD, the Center for Energy Workforce Development. They found that in the last 2-3 years, the number of people in the 18 to 23, the bracket, went down in the utility industry. That's not a good sign. That's when the age when people need to come in. And people are lingering. There are 19% of the workforce that's waiting to retire, but they can't because they can't afford to retire because the economy is so slow. So that's just like 19% we're going to lose. 62% by 2020. This is alarming. So what we have to do is, in addition to the creative ideas and partnering, we have to find ways of training the workforce people. And some of it, that training occurs through workshops and things. Some of it happens in local colleges and universities. But a lot of it is by word of mouth, in conferences, in seminars, and things like that. So you had a question there in the back.
I'd like to say one thing first.
Yes.
I didn't mention it here because it wasn't really directly related, but IBM has a strong outreach program to academic organizations. We're working with Sac State, we work with San Jose State, we work with College of San Mateo up here, we work with the SV Forum organization, we were, was it Mid-Pac? Mid-Pacific Community College Organization. Actually, Nina, who's my boss, who's been floating around here, is on the board of directors for that. A lot of the local junior colleges here are really focused on workforce development. We provide them hardware, we provide them software, and we provide them expertise, and we provide them purpose-built curriculum that they can simply download and use by becoming a member. And all of that is free. Because if we can't get the colleges to begin training that workforce, nothing else is going to get them to enter that particular career path. So we're focused in that particular area.
And particularly the state of California is very, very active with the Smart Grid Research Center out of Sac State, and there are 2 other campuses connected with that. Amir Makari,
yes,
the dean over in Sacramento, he's been amazing at this.
Yes.
And then the community colleges through like Foothill College with Robert Cormia, and then Jim Caldwell and John Cariz. And these people are also involved here in the state of California to bring this next generation of people in the utility industry. Ohio is very active, Texas is active, Florida has $5 million from stimulus funding for like what they call soup to nuts training. I don't know how we'll use soup in the utility, but we'll figure out a way. Maybe ramen noodles.
No, it's a sealer for the
oh, it's the sealer, okay.
So we have a couple of questions.
We have that, yeah. So there was a question back here.
Sorry, just a quick one because it bounces off of what you were saying. So I preface that by saying I'm going to ask the full question. I'm not a utilities guy. I don't deal very much with smart grid, at least on a daily basis. But I noticed what you say, which is right now a lot of the sales are made of government, funds of one kind or another, and that is dropping off a cliff, not the one we generally talk about, a cliff later in 2013. What has to change for utilities to buy a smart grid? Whether it comes from IBM, the partners, other companies. Do the utilities have to change? Do we all need to get better at explaining the value prop? What's going to change? And apparently a related comment.
Yeah, no, I have a related comment, exactly. What I was going to say is that you've talked a lot about building out the infrastructure and that you want to develop it, but like Erfan was talking about thinking too small. It seems like there's lots of money out there. For example, you're saying that in the Global Entrepreneurs section, there's analytics, 164 billion, cloud, 181 billion.
Yes.
It seems like it's like having you've developed, particularly the utility space in the past, it's all based on fossil fuels. It can be standalone. Now you're moving much more towards sustainability
yes.
and renewables. And that seems to blend itself for having a very interconnected backbone, infrastructure, nervous system. But at the center of the nervous system, you need what would seem to be development of analytics in the cloud and a brain, so that when you have that information collected there in the first place, people can then start building out infrastructure in places where it makes sense. The whole idea of having everywhere connected by a very developed infrastructure in the past may not actually blend itself and be optimal in the future. If you don't have populations which are necessary to sustain a large infrastructure build out, maybe there should be more emphasis on collecting the analytics and the information in the cloud first, and from that will drive where you actually best optimize putting resources in the first place.
Right. Those two comments actually are related. Is this related or is it separate?
It's semi-related. I wanted to ask Erfan a question because I go back to the telecommunications days, and telecommunications infrastructure was government funded.
Yes.
The entire original infrastructure we had across our country, and the same in the energy sector, was all government funded. We privatized to some level the both telecommunications and energy. The government is putting money, stimulus money, into, and the electric companies or the energy companies are the ones that are spending those stimulus dollars. So from the outside looking in, and I saw this in telecommunications, and you've actually seen where a lot of innovation has occurred, and sooner or later, those telecommunications companies have adopted the new technologies, largely because the consumers of that drove them to do that. But what I don't see happening is the energy sector who's been so heavily government subsidized to this day, is not responding to consumer-driven demand to upgrade, to adopt a smart grid. So one of the biggest concerns, we can innovate till the cows come home. And I believe the United States and IBM can do a very good job at that. I believe there's lots of good companies that do a lot of development and innovation. But the energy sector as a whole is still operating like it's a government-funded entity and not investing in the future.
So can I rephrase my question because it hasn't been answered?
Yeah, I know. I've got your.
Things have to change.
Actually, all of this is a lot related.
I'll add my comments.
Okay. There's a fundamental difference between looking at the telephone industry 50 years ago with the government subsidies and the build-out and what we have in the electrical industry today. And the difference is that at that time there was one single telephone company that did it all. That was AT&T. So that there was a single point of contact for the government to go to and say, do it. There are hundreds of electrical utilities in this country, and the government can't deal with all of those.
But 100 years ago, we're still only one government power company. So
that time, that's true. But in the meantime, because the government didn't address those things as a single unit then, they've now split and diversified to the point. So what has to change, to your question, is that the consumer mentality has to change, the government focus has to change, but mostly the utility mindset that what we've been doing for 50 years is still going to make us buckets of money for 50 years into the future has to change. And all of those three things have to go hand in hand. The government thing is part investment, part standards, part regulation, but they have to be, in my mind at least, the driver that makes it happen. Whether that's you will comply with the standards or the regulations, or we'll give you money or whatever. Okay? Without all of those things going together hand in hand, which is what you see happening in China, which is what you see happening in Europe and some other places, I don't think it will not happen gracefully here. Will it happen eventually? Yes, but it'll be behind everybody else. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
One last point.
You
mentioned about open standards, and
yes.
It doesn't help if people have proprietary standards. It seems like if you can actually get the data out there, the data will speak for itself, and it will actually drive innovation and where the dollar should be put to have best results.
To a certain extent, that's true.
I understand there's privacy issues.
Without looking into privacy issues, which can be dealt with, okay, the problem is that right now, all of the utility companies are saying, this is my data and you can't have it. They're not prepared to put that, again, ignoring the privacy issues, they're not willing to put that out on the table and say, how can we all work together to make this better for all of us? And that's part of that utility mindset that has to change. Right now, if you go south in this state and look at Sempra, San Diego Gas and Electric, and SoCal Edison, boy, those guys are leading the pack. They're so far ahead of the rest of anybody else in the whole western part of this country, and pretty much the whole country, that there's just no comparison. They understand, they get it, and they've built themselves a roadmap, and they're marching through it. There's a couple of places in Texas, Encore and Centerpoint, that are that way. There's Hydro One in Ontario that's that way. Florida Power and Light is headed that way. There are places here that get it, and they're working on it, and they're really working hard. There are other places that just can't seem to connect the dots.
But is that because the infrastructure is a lot more homogeneous? Like, for example, San Diego Gas and Electric, it's a very much homogeneous utility base.
It is. That is true.
It's a big territory and a lot of diverse customers.
Go ahead.
So, as someone who's connected to some 2,000 people in this business in 10 countries, with little munis and co-ops all the way to the big IOUs, I can tell you that smart grid is not a monolith, and the electric sector is not a monolith. So let's review that. the utilities that Chris has talked about, if you really go into those organizations, you find a few visionaries that are driving the initiative.
That's true.
And people are coming along. And eventually even the regulators in the state get excited when they walk into the room. But they're individuals. And I am concerned that once these people retire, who will be coming behind them and will they carry it? So what we need is a very structured process by which we take people who are relatively inexperienced and bring them up that experience level and share with them this vision. In the old days, we used to have this mentorship concept. In the electric sector, it was well established. People would sit for 20, 25 years with someone who knew the arts. It almost followed the Eastern ways, of samurais and things like that. But now, the time frame is very short to quickly deploy new applications and be experts. So people just call themselves experts, but they haven't quite reached that level of expertise. So there is a little bit of tension right now in this new way of doing business. So that's one thing, that we need to have a process by which we cultivate people. And so that more and more organizations can have the visionaries, can drive this. There are other places that are cash-strapped. If you're in a city, or if you're in a co-op situation where the collections are not very high, you can't just go and say, I'm going to depreciate my assets over the next 7 years and therefore I want smart meters. You have to justify that in the cities, in those co-ops. So that's becoming very, very difficult. They're able to make the case for some operational things to improve their efficiencies. But when you're talking about just smart meters, they say, well, 10 years ago you put a Twax or a Hunt, and you were getting automated meter reading. What exactly are you going to get by having a smart meter? Well, we're going to be able to read it 100 times a day. Why? So that's not where the monetization is. The monetization is in the home area network. It's in the demand response applications. It's in the energy management. So those people, a lot of times those customers are not quite up to speed on what all that is. And then you have consumer advocacy groups that come in and say, look, we have senior citizens, we have people who are terminally ill that are home all day. If you're going to suddenly start putting dynamic pricing, what is that going to do to me? So there is still a lot of flux. It's not like we have built a consensus in the country on A, what smart grid is, and B, what are its benefits. So my suggestion is, don't present it like a monolith. Show a set of business applications that are going to be enabled by smart grid and incrementally make the value proposition and get it approved. So for instance, if there is a place where peak power is a serious issue, demand response is going to be very important over there. There was a study done by Ahmad Faruqi of the Brattle Group it's called the Power of 5%, and he showed that a 5% decrease in the peak demand will actually reduce the marginal cost by 50%. That is incredible. So in those type of situations, it's really important to have that smart meter or come over the internet through an EMS and change that. But in places where electricity is being used all day long, like a Hawaii type of place, it's very difficult to make the case for demand response till electric vehicles show up. Now all of a sudden it's becoming very important, because if you have 3 or 4 vehicles on a street block, that transformer is going to be stressed out.
Assuming they all plug in at the same time at 5:05 when they get home.
Yeah. And exactly when wind is dropping. So then the question is, how are you getting green by electric vehicles if you're going to use coal power to charge up the electric vehicle? So, these are complex issues. And so that's why I don't believe that we should just market this term smart grid and it's either a yes or a no. Because is wide area monitoring, protection, and control smart grid? Sure it is. What will it do? It will help improve the reliability of the high voltage grid. Is distribution automation smart grid? It sure is. Control voltage reduction can reduce the demand for electricity during peak times. Is substation automation smart grid? It sure is. Tomorrow, when you have high penetration of renewable energy, the substation is going to act like a brain in that network. And it better make decisions, and don't rely on the network operations center for every decision. So these are things that if we make the case to the public, they will understand that these smart meters and the home area network is just one facet of a much larger mosaic of technologies and business processes that collectively we call smart grid. And that smart meter is not smart grid. It's not like an equal sign both ways, which today, if you take a poll, that's what people will tell you, that smart grid is smart meter, because that's what has been sold to them. And I feel that in some jurisdictions, the case cannot be made for smart meters, so they think that we don't need smart grid. Not the case at all. We need to have a leaner, meaner workforce with smart applications in their hands to be able to meet tomorrow's challenges. We cannot meet them with this old way of doing things with the new realities of environment. You know, where they're saying you can't have a nuclear plant, you can't have a coal plant. You saw what happened in Massachusetts with the natural gas plant, right? With the guy drilling a hole and the whole block saw fire over Thanksgiving. These kinds of things are going to become more and more as natural gas becomes a larger percentage of the energy mix. I mean, there's just no avoiding it. So we have to be mindful of the new realities, that we're not going to have a centralized plant. We're going to have virtual power plants. We're going to have these smart grid applications that will be controlling that. So, you know, we have enough material for several seminars and webinars to come. And I'm looking forward to a very productive December and 2013. So at this point, let's see if there are some more questions here, and if there are some in the room, and then we'll wrap it up.
One last point, just to clarify.
Go ahead.
I think it might have been missed a little bit. I do think that the end of stimulus funding era or whatever, or if IBM could put a proposal or whatever, I think collecting information and sharing best practices, what happens in different places, that then empowers different communities. They can see why they should put in place smart meters, because you have data from somewhere else that you can share. So that data of best practices can then be replicated in other places. But
some of that we do, but not to the extent that you're talking about. Okay.
But I think a lot of that then really can drive why people want to, you know, you have to have analytics and planning to really give an impetus why the utilities and everyone else should cooperate.
The case is fairly easily made to the utility. We have the data. Go ahead.
I'd argue that. And I'll go take away the smart meter. I piggyback Erfan's comment on the smart grid as a whole. There are communities that smart meters may not make sense. But
no argument.
Those communities, too often, whether they be the rural utility providers or energy providers as a whole, then choose to cop out in terms of making other investments in those areas and continue to do business as usual. And that's so I'm the root of all evil. I'm not trying to say anything, but it doesn't seem as though the energy sector, we have lots of innovative companies, we have lots of innovative uses, we have lots of data that can be shared, but the energy companies don't, as a whole, whatever form of media, does not seem to be as enticed to make those changes as rapidly, which is in investing in their own industry and their own future for cost savings, and are looking again to federal or government subsidizing. So
when we pretty much first started this, I put a list of market force drivers up there. Every year, IBM does a survey of CEOs around the world. And in each industry area, there's typically somewhere between about 800 or 900 and about 12 or 1,300 CEOs. In the energy space, that typically is about 1,100 or so. Those drivers came from them. We did not make those up. And what those CEOs tell us each year is that they understand that there's a problem. They understand why they should go there. What they can't do is figure out a way to make it economically feasible for them to do it in a reasonable time frame. To Erfan's to comment, they can't figure out how to monetize it, sell it to their customers as to why the customers should help pay for this, because the government is not going to subsidize it all, period. So does that mean I'm going to pay a slightly higher electrical rate because I now have a smart meter on the back of my house? Yeah. Does it mean eventually that I'm probably going to have a home area network mandated by the utility so they can shut down my swimming pool or my air conditioner or my dryer to do demand response when we're having a blackout period? The answer is probably. I hope I'm retired and gone by then, but you know. And I think that's exactly the problem. That's exactly the problem. I don't want to change.
There are consumers, but this is a one-sided. Utility sector as a whole is taking this as a one-sided approach, as opposed to saying, listen, we can lower your costs. And that's the way to sell to consumers, is to give them a feature and benefit that they don't have present today.
Yep.
And I think that's what's missing, is there is a lot of innovation that's coming, and that I've heard everything from the smart refrigerator to the smart car to the smart meter to the smart everything that make our lives simpler, better, and more affordable. But we don't seem to be, where it doesn't add up is when at the month our utility cost doesn't seem to get any better.
You know why? Most utilities are rate-based. That means they calculate their costs, they go to the Public Utility Commission and say, we have to charge this much, so this is the margin of that.
Yep.
And it doesn't matter what happens, because
that's
one of the problems, isn't it? That's
what I'm, they're still government subsidized.
Well, it's not government subsidized, but it's actually it's fixed price.
Regulated.
Regulated.
So that's another.
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to.
I think one of the key things about distinguishing between telecom and energy sector, you really need to do that, because electricity is, your life depends on it. With telephone, there are still places that don't have telephone. They can still live just fine. But with electricity, because it's life dependent, is dependent on it, it's regulated in a way that makes it difficult for the private sector to come in and give a la carte services to one group versus another. Now, the aggregators have been doing that, the Tendrils, the Converges, Energates, and others. But when you want to make an offering in the regulated market, you got to have a level playing field. And that's why this gateway through the meter was conjured up, even though 92% of homes are cable ready. But it's just that they don't have wide area network necessarily coming through that cable. They may be just having a television service. So the point was that the regulators said, we got to create a situation in which everyone, rich or poor, whether you have a big house or small house, has access. So this is why it makes it a little more complicated. But I do see that with increased deregulation, as we're seeing in Europe with Ireland and England
and Texas
and Spain and Texas, you're beginning to see private companies coming in and providing those types of value-added services and making a reasonably good living. But all of this is slowed down by what's happening in the economy with the uncertainty about what's going to happen in the next few months. I think that once Congress works out their issues and the consumer confidence comes up a little bit, you're going to see the private sector getting more involved in providing these energy management services. But I think that it's a disservice to call the whole thing smart grid without really explaining the real benefits a la carte. Because if you explain the benefits a la carte, it's not just an up or down decision on smart grid. I'm very, very concerned that people will just lump all of it with the smart meter and say, I don't want smart grid because I don't want a smart grid.
Okay, just come back to Chris's point again. You said you don't want someone going into your swimming pool and turning it off when there's a Dior situation. My point is that if you take model scenarios and you actually say, you give people choices, and you say, if you don't do this, it's going to cost X. If you do this, it's going to cost this. And the data speaks for itself.
I have no problem with the utility putting a rate structure in place that says that if I decide to go turn off my dryer or my swimming pool or my air conditioner or whatever to help shield them from some of the undersupply issues that they're facing at that point in time, I'm probably going to do that, and I'm happy to do that. But I don't want them arbitrarily doing it, whether I like it or not.
And I think that's the general.
And I think that I was going to say, I think I'm typical.
So we have those abilities. There are technologies and innovation that's present today to enable those functions.
Absolutely.
Today.
Yes.
But we have barriers for getting those technologies adopted into the ecosystem. And it's how do we bridge, and I'm not trying to just make the utility companies the bad guys, honestly.
I understand.
But there is, I think the sentiment, general sentiment is exactly, well, I'm willing to pay more if I get a benefit for doing something else.
Right. My personal opinion is that it's a learning curve thing. Is that, you know, it's like a political candidate. Sometimes they run 2 or 3 times just to get their name known before they actually expect to win the election. So I think that we're going to have to go out there and approach the consumer, and each time we'll get it just a little bit farther down the road to the point where they finally get it. Okay? Will that be 5 years or 10 years or whatever? I have no idea. Now, that's my personal opinion. Don't take it for anything more than that. But I think it's an education function more than it is a technology or implementation issue. Yes, sir.
Well, something inevitable is going to happen if we don't put the smart grid in, is that we're going to run out of energy. They're not building any more power stations. No one wants one in their backyard. The projections in 2006 is that we were going to run out of energy in 2012. And we're going to have rolling blackouts. Now, economy came along and luckily helped us out along. But the projection has only gone out to 2018 or 2020 for most states in the U.S. And the one thing that's happened, we had the Enron crisis here, and we started to have blackouts because no one could afford to connect supply and the demand. And things had to change then. So it might, it's either going to happen now because people predict it's going to happen, or it's going to happen in the future because it's going to be a necessity for us to survive on this planet.
That's very true. Absolutely correct.
And the challenge with that 11th hour way of doing it is that it'll be highly proprietary. It will be driven by a few vendors who are going to give you the alpha and omega, and then it'll become obsolete in not so long.
Yeah, but you were part of that guy because you know how much work's going into putting all these things in place. There's a lot of things in motion today that's going to come to fruition before that time frame. So I don't think it's a do-or-die situation. What it is right is no one can yet justify spending the money to do something when we don't have the problem today. That's the problem. That's basically, we don't have the problem today.
That's the crisis theory.
So it really comes down to articulating the value proposition in ways that people understand today.
Or we have to be prepared for, the evacuation procedure.
Yes, right.
Right?
Yes.
There's no more energy here, let's leave the planet. I mean, that's the alternative.
Just to be fair to the folks on online, because there are East Coast people and it's almost 11 o'clock there, I just want to thank, first of all, Chris Heckart of IBM for an excellent presentation and very thought-provoking, and went way beyond, what I was thinking was going to be a very technically focused presentation, but I'm really glad that you ventured out and showed us all the different ways in which we can interact with IBM and what IBM is doing in the smart grid. Just a couple of concluding remarks. First, our next venue is going to be in Southern California in Culver City. National Technical Systems, which is a certification facility, is going to be hosting us, and we're going to have a webinar that will be a seminar presented by Smart Utility Systems out of Chino Hills, California. And they are very active in mobile applications, in big data management and analytics, and in cybersecurity. And they will be presenting on big data and analytics. And there will be, I believe, someone from Teradata also involved there. So that will be December 11th, which is, I believe, a Tuesday, and it will be 1 p.m. Pacific for an hour and a half. And then we will continue, we'll look for our next date with IBM. And these,
the 18th?
yes, 18th will continue. It's a Tuesday, I believe.
Yes.
And the reason why we're not doing the 4th Tuesday is because, you know, Santa will get in the way.
Let me add one thing.
Yes.
For those of you who came and really wanted a technical presentation, get in touch with me, and well, I'll be happy to go as technical as you want to go. But I felt like a more high-level kind of, this is what we're working on, this is kind of the space that we're in, would be more beneficial to more people for this particular conversation.
Thank you.
But if you want to go technical, get in contact with me, and we'll talk about whichever area in here that you want to be technical about.
So my concluding, this is one final note. To keep the Smart Grid educational series alive, we need your input. We need people to come and present their innovative ideas. This year, I've showcased it by going and recruiting people. But now I'm asking people to take the personal initiative and approach me so that I can schedule you. And it's really important for you to share your ideas. We don't want you to move into some other sector or not share your idea because you think it's not going to fly. Throw it out and let's see if it'll fly or not. I would much rather us be in that mode rather than, you know, predicting what will and will not fly. And then the final comment that I'd like to make is that education for smart grid, in my opinion, is one of the biggest stumbling blocks. There's a lot of desire, zeal, enthusiasm that I see in the industry. But quite often I find that because people come from different academic preparation, they don't have the requisite skills to carry their intuition into a real thing. And that's why education is so important. So use these forums to stimulate your mind and then go find the appropriate courses, seminars, workshops, and things to bring yourself up to speed, because then you will really unleash your creativity. So thank you again, and at this point I will conclude the recording. And to those of you who are online, I really appreciate your participation today, and look forward to you in the next forum. And thank you and good night.
Please help.